Thanks for tuning in to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Dutch, and this is our AFC and NFC Conference Championship game preview. It's going to be solo yet again today. For those of you who are annoyed with hearing me, you're just going to have to put up with it. So we'll talk about the divisional round first, and then we'll get into the actual conference championship games. We'll just start off with the elephant in the room. And no, I'm not talking about Mark Andrews' catches yet or lack of thereof. It's the refs in the Kansas City game. The calls made were really bad. Plain and simple. And this isn't out of like a Kansas City hate or anything like that. It's more just about the purity of the game. If you want me to be like perfectly honest about it, it's the fact that when you watch the game, they are detracting from the game in a negative way. I 100% understand that if a guy puts his helmet underneath the dude's chin, like Washington did to Jared Goff, that it should be a flag in accordance with NFL rules. That flag was not called. However, Mahomes was given two that continued the drives that ended in scores. And those, in turn, made a difference in the game. And then you also have Mahomes, who intentionally slows up on the sidelines and flops, trying to get a penalty. Luckily, they didn't throw the flag. But it's getting to the point where it's like, it's clear that Mahomes knows, I'm going to get the penalty. I'm going to get a flag for getting touched. They use it to their advantage. And that, in my opinion, is outside the scope of how the game's supposed to be played. It's outside the scope. I understand protecting safety or having this player safety be at the forefront of the game. However, when it begins to detract from the game when it's not actually a penalty, that is a huge negative. Now, that's all I'm going to say about it. You know, I saw a meme this morning that Maul sent me that was, Buffalo has been assessed a 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness before the game even begins. We'll see how much of a factor it is in the AFC Championship game. We'll get into that game here in a minute. For right now, I'll drop the conversation about the refs. I'm sure it's going to be talked about a lot going into this week, but I wanted to make mention of it before going any further. Just the general opinion here with the podcast. The game itself, let's be honest. Chiefs are not a great football team. Did they win the game? 100%. Texans were in the game. The problem with the Texans was they really couldn't run the ball, nor, and this was the bigger issue, they could not stop the blitz from Kansas City when they got behind the chains. And no one's been able to figure it out. Spags has done an incredible job of when a team gets behind the down and distance, he brings the blitz, and he usually doesn't bring it from the outside. He brings it up the middle. He makes it so that the quarterback does not have the ability to step up into the pocket. He has to now try to get around the outside. And how he teaches his blitz guys is under no circumstance give up the edge if you're the end guy. I don't care about you trying to get to the quarterback. We're going to get to the quarterback through the A gap, right up the middle, right between the center. That's where we're coming. What I need you to do is not let this guy escape. If you can do that, we'll win. And that's what they've been doing. The Texans could not pick up the blitz, which I get it. It's more guys than you have in protection. But by doing that, it made it that, hey, when you're 3rd and 10, you're trying to pick up a first down, you're just having to check it down for a 2 to 3 yard gain. And they do that every single time you're behind the down and distance, and it made it to where the Texans had no answers. The Chiefs' defense won them the game. The Chiefs' defense continues to be the storyline. The storyline from the offense is somehow, some way, no one can figure out how to guard Travis Kelce during the playoff games. He's incredible. And really, when you watch him, he really doesn't run a route. And I say that not as like a negative. I say that as like the best compliment I can give to Travis Kelce. When you watch him run his route, he knows exactly what the defense is doing, and he breaks his route off to sit in the openness of the zone defense. He makes it to where it is almost impossible to guard him, because unless you are going to put a guy one-on-one who does not leave his side no matter what, he's going to find the openings in his own defense. He just will. He does not run his route to completion. He runs it to the open spots in the defense, and it kills defenses time and time and time again. Happened throughout the game against the Texans. That's why you look back, in the regular season, he really didn't have a game like he had against the Texans. In these big moments, he balls out. He just balls out. You have to be able to lock him up. If you can't lock him up, Travis Kelce is going to score. He's going to get his catches. If you allow him to just run free in zone, he's going to do that. You almost have to Revis Island Kelce. You have to just commit one guy to him and be like, we're running zone, but you are an 8-ball. You are locked up on him for the entire game. Don't leave his side. That's what you have to do. It is the only option, which I say that into the other side effect that when you look of the Kansas City Chiefs offense, it's not that impressive outside of Kelce. Like, their running game isn't there. Like, Pacheco, it doesn't look as dominant before the injury as he did before. Here lately, they're not getting a great push offensively in the run game. From the wide receiver position, is Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown super fast? Yes. But in terms of them having this like dramatic impact, like you're sitting back and you're like, dude, Xavier Worthy, he'd be the number one guy on anyone else's team. Like, that's not the case. Like, he makes plays, don't get me wrong, but from the standpoint of like Kansas City having this just like, dude, this offense, like, I don't know how you stop it. It's not there, and it really hasn't been there all season. I think everyone can agree to that Kansas City's offense just hasn't lived up to the billing. And I think we threw it out on the podcast. Like, there was a thing sent out that if you compare two quarterback stats this past year, one is labeled as like, man, terrible year, absolute trash. The other one is like, he's generational talent. Mahomes and Rodgers had really, and when I say really close, I mean pretty much identical statistics throughout the regular season. Mahomes and Rodgers have played the same, and you look at the Chiefs, it's not so. Does Mahomes throw a few bad picks here and there? Absolutely. But from the standpoint of Kansas City having this like offensive juggernaut of an offense, no. What Kansas City does is they are very good about not turning the ball over in the postseason, and they're good about not. And by doing that, how do they not do that? They take what's given to them. They will happily check the ball down the field, 5, 3-yard, 4-yard, 7-yard, 11-yard gains throughout and get all the way down the red zone score. And they find a way to get into the end zone. Kansas City doesn't settle for field goals. In the red zone, they score touchdowns. And it makes the difference at the end of the game. It makes a difference. And I think it was Jim Nantz was calling the game. He said it, and it's so true. Special teams matter. Like, Houston misses 2 field goals and an extra point. Like, you sit back and you go, look, like, I get it wouldn't have won you the game, those 7 points alone, but it makes a difference in the game. It adds a different level. To beat Kansas City, you've got to come in with your A game. If you turn the ball over, if you can't stop them, you are going to lose the game. If you can't make field goals, if you can't make extra points, Kansas City is going to make you pay for those mistakes. Plain and simple. You want to beat Kansas City, you have to be on your A game. And if you're not, you're going to lose the game. The Texans lost the game for that matter. Did the refs not help it? Correct. But were there plenty of opportunities for the Texans to have that game and a better reach? 1,000% the Texans could not execute. That's why they lost. That's the Kansas City Texans game. That's what I'll get into it before getting into Kansas City and Buffalo here in a minute. The next game that came after the Chiefs was really the upset so far of the playoffs in terms of the Commanders absolutely just dogging the Lions. The Lions defense with all the injuries, and I give a shout out to Dan Campbell. When you think about what he did with all the injuries of this team, it's incredible. It's incredible. However, those injuries showed up in the biggest way against Washington. They could not stop Jaden Daniels from running. Could not. Some of it was just poor execution on the defense. Terry Arnold sitting out there, his only responsibility on that fourth down play was to set the edge. His first step is to the inside. His first step is towards the center, and he gave up the edge. Now, he still has to be able to make that tackle and not let Jaden juke him. It's still a one-on-one matchup, but he gave up all possibility of making that tackle on that play when his whole job is to set the edge. You cannot let him pull it and run, and they gave that up. Time and time again, they gave up plays. You look at Scary Terry's touchdown. They bring the corner, Branch comes into the box on a blitz. Look outside. They got 3 wide receivers versus 2 corners, safety over the top. Guess what? If you block up those 2 corners, he is one-on-one with a safety for a touchdown, and what do? Touchdown. Every time the Lions did a good job in the first half of trying to respond. I sat back, and when Jamison Williams scored that touchdown, I was like, man, that's huge. Like, you're going to take this in and make it a 3-point game going in a half. Washington drives right down the field and scores again. 10-point game. Detroit gets the ball back, and this is what really killed Detroit. I don't care, and Herm Edwards said it on ESPN, and I did love this point. He made it more towards the Buffalo game, which I'll get into in a minute, but it stands true for Washington-Detroit. You cannot turn the ball over in the playoffs and expect to win. You're playing against a good team. Regardless of the seeding of the opponent, Washington's still a good enough team to get into a playoffs. They can, and they will beat you if you do dumb stuff. Detroit turning the ball over as much as they did, guess what? Cost them the game. You cannot turn the ball over like they did and win football games, especially when you have a pick six. Like, you took and I think about it goes all the way back to the fumble with Goff. Here you are, 2nd and 1, they call pass, and I'm sitting back and I'm like, run the ball. They have not had an answer for Gibbs the whole first quarter. Run it. Like, I don't care what's going on right now. Blow them out of the water in the first half. Separate yourselves with a score. And it turned into a 14-point swing. They fumbled. Washington went right down the field and scored 7. Those type of things kill you as a team, and it killed Detroit. There was just their inability to stop Washington is a whole nother thing outside of the turnovers. Either one was going to kill your team. When you did both, that's why the score looked like it did. You give up 45 points to Washington, you're going to lose the game. Defense couldn't stop them. Offense kept giving them the ball. It was a done deal for Detroit. Is their window closed? I know that's going to be the first question. I don't know. And the reason I say I don't know is I still have faith in camp. They still have pieces. It has Ben Johnson done a absolutely fantastic job of calling plays, 100%. They're going to get healthy. Aiden Hutchinson being on that field against Washington probably does make the difference. In terms of a defense, it doesn't change the turnovers that they had, but from a standpoint of getting the Jaden Daniels being able to affect the pass rush, 100%, he makes a difference. Does he win them the game? I don't know. I don't know if his output on defense was enough to offset the turnovers, but I think it definitely gives him a better chance than he would when he's not on the field. So Detroit has pieces. They have the players. Who does Campbell get in to call the plays? That's going to be the huge that is going to determine whether or not this is the end, the bubbles now or the window's closed for Detroit, or whether they can extend that open window. Is who he puts into those positions to call plays. Aaron Glenn hasn't been hired yet. Ben Johnson is by the Bears. Now on the other side, the Commanders. You look at the Commanders and you say, man, from an offensive standpoint, tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. Did they give up some bad scores defensively? Yeah, and that's sort of been Washington's thing this whole season. You're going to get some points on Washington. Washington's defense is not the best. Everyone can agree to that. However, the reason they win is because they outscore you. Cliff Kingsbury has called a great game from Jaden Daniels, but I want to be clear. Jaden Daniels threw the ball amazing. I heard Tom Brady say it during the game when he was calling it, and I thought it was a great, amazing point. He said that Dan Marino once told him there is no defense to a perfectly thrown football. No defense. And that showed up against the Lions. Jaden Daniels threw some of the prettiest footballs, period, against the Lions. They were indefensible. He won them the game. If Jaden Daniels continues to play like that, they'll beat the Eagles. If you have a quarterback that can throw the football like that and run the football like that and make the plays that he made, they'll beat the Eagles. It will come down to, can Jaden Daniels continue to throw the football like he has? If he does, they continue to win. If he doesn't, they lose. Plain and simple. The entire playoffs rest on Jaden Daniels' shoulders. Has he done it against Tampa and Detroit? 100%. We'll get into the prediction here in a minute with them in Philly. That wraps up the Commanders-Lions recap. On to the next day, we get Eagles versus the Rams. I had the Rams winning, and honestly, I think that if it hadn't snowed, I think they do. It clearly affected both teams, but it affected the Rams tremendously more in their passing offense than it did the Eagles. The Eagles were able to just turn around and hand the ball off to Saquon. Saquon, legendary. You felt good watching Saquon, regardless if you're pulling for the Eagles or not. It's good to see a player that played in a terrible organization of the Giants have tremendous success when a team of better caliber picks him up and allows him to shine to his fullest potential. Saquon is that good. He won the Giants game solely because he was playing for the Giants. Now that he's on the Eagles roster, you're really seeing his true, ceiling of a player. He's amazing. Amazing player. The Rams, however, defense got after Hurts. Hurts, I think, took 8 sacks that game. I mean, the Rams defense was all over him. And it really showed up in terms of Jalen Hurts, of the quarterbacks remaining, I would argue is the dead last in terms of the ability to throw the football. Is Jaden a good quarterback? Can he make plays? 100%. But when you sit back and you go, well, I want to rank these guys, I'm going Mahomes, Allen, Jaden Daniels, then Jalen Hurts. Of all the guys that can throw the football left in the playoffs, Jalen's the guy I'm taking last if we're out at high school or out at recess picking teams. So from an Eagles standpoint, they won because of two things. Saquon Barkley and the defensive line of the Eagles being able to create turnovers against the Rams. Causing Kyron Williams fumble, causing Matt Stafford's fumble in the pocket, there in the snow, there at the end, won them the game. They were able to effectively cancel out how talented the Rams offense was because of turnovers. They won the turnover battle. In the playoffs, I would argue it's probably one of the more difficult things to do if you want to look at a true stat line, is if you lose the turnover battle, there is a very high chance you're going to lose the game. If you turn the ball over, odds are not in your favor. That's what showed up for the Rams. The Rams could move the football. That and the snow. There was just, you look at drives that they had. I think about, it was on third down. They have Puka in the slot. They run an out. Stafford hits him perfectly. Puka just drops it. I think the weather affected that. If they're inside, Puka makes that catch 9 times out of 10. It was just with the snow, the wetness of the football, all those different factors, flat out dropped it. It's not an excuse. I'm just saying that's what happened. I think those factors contributed to it, but that's what made it so that you sit back and you go, well, why did the Rams lose? They were unable to convert in the situations that mattered most. They had the opportunity to win the game, just couldn't get it done. From the Eagles' standpoint, since they're moving on, their biggest factor is exactly what I just talked about. It's the offensive passing. They have Saquon. Saquon's going to get yards. He came into the game. Vegas had his line at like 134. My man put up 205. Like, Saquon's been ridiculous when it comes to running the football. I just sit back and go, how do we answer that? How do you answer it as a defense? My answer as a defense is you commit to stopping the run. Is if you want to beat us, hey, you want to win Philly, you're going to have to show that you can throw the football. Philly has the talent. When you think about that offense, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley, there's no reason that they shouldn't be putting up 200 plus, 250 yards passing each and every game. Like, Guys are so afraid of Saquon that you're getting one-on-one coverages with those guys on the outside. It should happen. You watch that safety that Hurts took. Who's wide open in the middle of the field? Literally right at the 10-yard line. A simple check down throw. Dallas Goedert's wide open. Hurts' inability to make those quick decisions that you see out of Mahomes, that you see out of Jaden Daniels, that you see out of Josh Allen have cost them. It almost cost them the game. They were able to pull it out because of a defense and turnovers. They've got to get that figured out going into the week versus the Commanders. That wraps up Eagles and the Rams. Final game, Baltimore, Buffalo. Tremendous game. There's going to be a lot of talk that playoff Lamar showed up. Did he show up and have some costly turnovers? 100%. The interception was really bad. That's the one that I lay at his feet and say that was awful. Right before the fumble that Von Miller recovered and took down to the opposite side of the field, what happened? Mark Andrews dropped a wide open pass. Dropped it. No one around him. Flat out dropped it. Mark Andrews had that drop, immediately play thereafter, fumble. Mark Andrews later in the game catches the ball, gets it punched out, leads to points. And then Mark Andrews at the end of the game, 2-point conversion, hits him right in the hands. You couldn't ask. A lot of people show that Steelers game from a few years ago where honestly it would have been a difficult catch. It's still something that you expect, your guy to make, that you're paying that much money to play the position of tight end. But this one, there's no excuse. It was right there. The game should have been tied, taken into overtime. Just didn't happen. Didn't make the catch. The Ravens, especially in the first half, struggled moving the football because of turnovers. Those 2 turnovers killed them. And yet again, this is why I get back to, if you turn the football over against a good team, it's going to be very difficult to win. People were making the argument, well, Buffalo's offense didn't look very good. Should they have won the game? And Herm Edwards was sitting there going, look, like Baltimore is a good team. That shows how good Baltimore is. That Baltimore turned the ball over 2 times and still, it's right, or really 3 times, but the 2 in the first half, turned the ball over against Buffalo and still they're right there in it. It came down to a 2-point conversion at with a minute to go in the game to determine who was going to win, whether it was going to overtime or not. Baltimore, extremely dangerous of a team. Buffalo prevailed. Buffalo found ways to win. Now, I get more into the game. I'm going to talk about something before going on to next week about the Buffalo-Baltimore game, because me and Maul were getting to watch it, and we were talking about it, and it's an interesting take. So I think that Buffalo made the correct decision by kicking the field goal on 4th and 2 down in their own red zone with the ability to make a 2-score game against Baltimore. Why? Because if they had missed that field, or if they had not gotten the 4th down and Baltimore did exactly what they did, which was drive the ball right down the field and score, Buffalo loses the game. It's done. You're going to be down by 3. You may get the ball back with 30 seconds. You may get it back with 0 seconds. You don't know how Baltimore manages that clock differently. But in all likelihood, if you go for it and get stopped, and Baltimore does exactly what they did, which they did for most of that game, you lose. Baltimore's going to score. That call of going for it on 4th down cost you the game. In this game, by kicking the field goal, it made the difference. And Maul was like, great call, 100%. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I go, however, if Buffalo wins this game and they're in the exact same position next week, I go for it. And Maul sort of sat there and he's like, you're probably right. And that is because against Mahomes, I'm going to go ahead and already bet my man's going to get the touchdown. If you give him time on the clock like Buffalo did, he's going to score. And they're going to get the 2. That's not a question. So what do you have to do? You have to put the game out of reach. You have to be willing to go for it on 4th and 2 to make sure that it's a 2-score game. That way, with a time left on the clock, Kansas City can't come back. Even with Buffalo knows Buffalo, which I hate saying this before we get into the Kansas City Buffalo game, Buffalo in the regular season's 3-1 against the Chiefs. In the postseason, they're 0-3, and we know how Buffalo does when given a fourth opportunity. I saw a meme that said, no way in a team would they ever be able to go 0-4 against the same team, or 0-4 in the playoffs. That's just not possible. It's never happened before, and Buffalo knows well and true. I'm surprised that's not been mentioned more outside of meme pages by ESPN and some other just major news outlets talking about sort of that trivia fact. I'm sure it will going into the game, especially if it gets away from Buffalo. That will be the outlining factor, is going 0-4 against Mahomes in the playoffs. For Buffalo, Josh Allen looked amazing. He's unstoppable, especially with the run. You look at how their offense works. What's nuts is they really don't have a number one receiver. I know a lot of people are going to say Shakur, but what I'm saying is like they don't have a guy that you sit back and go, that's the dude that could go and play for another team and be their number one guy. Buffalo doesn't have that. And honestly, it makes them more lethal. You really can't determine who to guard because everyone's capable of catching the football and everyone works together to drive the football down the field. That offense is lethal because of that. It's very similar to Kansas City. Kansas City has a bunch of guys, but at no point, outside of Travis Kelce, is one guy really the dominant guy. They just spread the ball out efficiently. They have guys that make catches and make plays on the football, but at no point is it like that one guy is the guy we got to guard. It's not Justin Jefferson. It's not Jamar Chase. They don't have those type of players that it's like, this is the main guy that we have to take away this game. You don't know who to take away. Everyone has the ability to beat you when playing Buffalo, and that is a tremendous asset. So that wraps up the Baltimore Bills game. Let's get into the AFC Conference Championship since we're breaking down Buffalo and the Chiefs. That's the storyline. Can Buffalo not go 0-4? What does Josh Allen have to do to win this game? And more importantly, how do you stop Mahomes? How do you stop Mahomes? In this game, in my opinion, for Buffalo, it is about not letting Mahomes run. He kills teams with the run. We see it time and time again. You cannot let your end crash. It is one of those things that it's like I would rather almost have him pick us apart than you crash and try to make a play and him get out for 14 yards on a 3rd and 11. In those positions, I'd rather you blitz and take your chances with it, but tell your end, sort of like Ohio State did with Notre Dame, is, hey, we're just not going to let you outside. And it's really similar to how Spags plays defense for the Chiefs. They will blitz in the A-gap. They'll blitz right up the middle of the defense and say, look, if you want to try to run, you can, but our ends, they're not crashing. Their one job is to not let you escape on the outside of this pocket because the inside's done. You're not stepping into it. Your only way's outside to us, and we're going to make the play. And Kansas City has been running a clinic the past 2 playoff seasons doing exactly just that. So for Josh Allen and them to win, they got to pick up the blitzes. How do you best beat Spags is not get behind the chains. They have to move the football down the field and not get into 3rd and long, 4th and long type of positions that you're just having to embrace the suck of this defense is going to come after me. I've got to get the ball out of my hands, but I still need a lot of yards to do it. That's how bad things happen. Rarely does that work out for the offense. You have to stay ahead of the chains. And more importantly for the Bills, when you get into the red zone, you got to score touchdowns. You want to beat Mahomes, he's going to put up points. You can't settle for field goals. For Buffalo to win, when they are in the red zone, every time they get in the red zone, it needs to be a touchdown. And then the other thing for Buffalo, you can't turn the ball over. Do not give an inch to Kansas City. Because if they do, Kansas City's going to win the game. Kansas City's going to win the game. Going into this game, Kansas City's a favorite for good reason. In the playoffs, they're just unstoppable. It's going to take an A game out of Buffalo to win. Is it possible? 100%. Kansas City, as I stated off at the beginning of this podcast, isn't a great offensive team. Their defense has shown moments, but still, overall, when you look at the whole team, they're very beatable. The Texans had every ability to beat them. every right to it too. They just missed some opportunities. Can Buffalo capitalize on those opportunities? If they can come out and play their A game, Buffalo wins. If Buffalo comes out and turns the ball over, Kansas City wins this game. Plain and simple. How do I think it's going to go? I'm gonna take Kansas City. Too many times have we been shown this exact script and Kansas City's won. I hate saying it, but at the same time, it's I feel like Thanos, regardless, inevitably you come back to me. That's what's happened. Run from it, fight it, it ends the same. You have to go through Kansas City to get to a Super Bowl. If Josh Allen does it, absolute legend. It will be tremendous going into the playoffs. See it, seeing if that can happen. Get them to a Super Bowl with a chance for Buffalo to win their first. I'd love to see it. Don't know what's going to happen. If he makes it happen, tremendous for Buffalo. Living legend. He already is in that category, but to get over the hump of Patrick Mahomes would really solidify him as one of Buffalo's greats, especially if they can clinch it off with Buffalo's first Super Bowl. I'd love to see it. I just don't think it happens. Other side. Commanders-Eagles. The Commanders' offense will be the death of the Eagles if the Eagles let it. If the Eagles can't tackle, if the Eagles can't contain Jaden Daniels, they will lose this game. And it's just because the Eagles' offense hasn't shown, outside of Saquon Barkley, especially in the passing game, the ability to really control the game. If you sit back and you go, hey, in this game, 2 minutes ago, you got to have a drive to win. Who do you trust more? In terms of just quarterbacks, I'd say Jaden Daniels. That's who I'd rather put my money with for him to go win the game. I just haven't seen it out of Jalen Hurts. If it gets into a shootout, Washington wins. How the Eagles win? Run the football. Run the football. Take the game out of Washington's control. Don't let it become a shootout. Don't play what Detroit did. Don't try to get into this back and forth. But at the same time, Detroit was still in that game, even though they turned the ball over as much as they did. If the Eagles cannot turn the football over, if you can just not give Jaden Daniels a short field, if you cannot give him opportunities to continue to either catch back up and score or get ahead in the score because of just, opportunities he shouldn't have had to touch the football, the Eagles have a great chance. But the Eagles can't turn the football over. It's the same thing I said against Buffalo. What do I think happens? I think the Eagles do play a really good game. I like Washington. I like what they're doing. But at the same time, Washington, just like Kansas City, is very beatable, especially on their defensive front. I think Philly has the offense to do it. Did Washington beat Philly there at the end of the season? Yes. People forget that Jalen Hurts had a concussion, was knocked out for 3 whole quarters of the game, pretty much. Kenny Pickett made it to where Washington had to drive down at the end of the game to win. They did. They won the game. But there's a lot more on the line this time. Philly's seen this outcome before. I think that helps both sides. Philly knows that Washington can easily come back and win the game, and at the same time, Washington knows they can do it too. How do I think that helps either team more? I think it helps Philly more. I think Philly knows what they're getting in Washington. I think Philly is going to be prepared for Washington coming into Philly. It will be, a great playoff atmosphere, both in Kansas City and Philadelphia. I like Philly in the game. I think Saquon gets his moment. I think he's going to take them to the Super Bowl. We'll see if they're able to win. But just from a gut standpoint of what I see going in the game, if you had the best player on the field is not Jaden Daniels, it's Saquon Barkley. Give me Saquon to carry the Eagles into the Super Bowl. I think that he's that dominant of a player that when push comes to shove, you're going to feed the ball to Saquon. I think Saquon gets his. I think he takes them to the Super Bowl, which would lead us with a rematch. Chief Eagles, if the prediction works out as I see. But we'll see. That's the beautiful thing is last week I was 1-3. Yeah, I did not have a good. Got the Detroit game wrong, and then the final 2 games I went with Baltimore and the Rams. Got both of those wrong. So if you're a Bills and Commanders fan, you're probably loving the podcast right now because I haven't picked many right this year. Not sure how Maul and Pops are going to pick it. We'll get those picks up onto our social media stuff later in the week once they give me their picks for the game. But that's just sort of how we see it thus far. I do want to appreciate you guys for tuning in with the divisional recap and going in the conference championship weeks. After the conference championship weeks, we'll try to get all the boys back together to give you guys a proper Super Bowl preview episode. And then we'll head into the off season. I do appreciate you guys for tuning in, but it is time to pull chalks on the conference championship round episode. We'll see you guys post this and pre the Super Bowl. Thanks for tuning in.